Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolf Podcast on iCode Media. Today I'm going to have a great conversation with Dr. Thanh Mai, and he practices in Southern California, and he's sort of created this niche of his practice related to myopia management and scleral lenses and binocular vision, and he really did it in a way where he had this foundational belief about the profession of optometry, about himself as an optometrist and his opportunity in the future of the profession. So I had a really great time talking to Dr. Mai today. Please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. So today I want to talk about the MyDay multifocal for just a second. It has been a really great thing in our practice for our patients who are presbyopes of all areas, but you know, those tricky presbyopes are always the ones that are kind of emerging, where they don't want to give up any of their faraway vision, but they're having some struggles up close. And so what the MyDay multifocal has been able to do for us is to allow those patients to transition into a multifocal more easily. And then as we have those patients progress into other levels where they need more add powers, it's been a nice smooth transition. So the ultimate hurdle that we've seen in our practice before the MyDay multifocal was that we'd have patients who would resist any transition to a multifocal lens because of that distance blur. We just haven't seen that. So if you haven't started using MyDay multifocal in your practice, I would encourage you to start, check it out, reach out to your Cooper reps for those trial lenses, and commit to MyDay multifocal for your patients. I think they're going to like it. If you haven't checked out MacuHealth yet for your patients in Category 1 through Category 4, I think there's a lot of evidence that you should be considering. The first is, if we just look at AREDS 2 and what they talk about, MacuHealth is, so for patients in Category 3 and Category 4 AMD, MacuHealth is a great option for them that follows that entire protocol, and it also adds mesozeaxanthine to the mix, which, if you look at some of the evidence, I believe shows me that it's going to thicken the macular pigment better than without mesozeaxanthine. It also uses the correct AREDS 2 dose of zinc at 25 milligrams, and so you don't have to worry so much about the potential side effects of zinc. The other thing to think about, and it's beyond the scope of this, although you've probably heard me talk on other podcasts, is that in patients in Category 1 and 2, there may be some additional benefit to supplementing them with something that may be a little bit less than the AREDS 2, so you don't have to add as much to it. And that's where I use the MacuHealth LMZ3. And so I think if you haven't done this yet, I'd consider MacuHealth in your practice and for your patients. And it's been great for my patients, and we really feel like we can have the ability to help those patients in all categories of macular degeneration. All right, Dr. Thanh Mai.
Yes.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So we were trying to do this a couple times before, and the technology didn't work very well, so thanks for being flexible. Mm-hmm. There's a couple things I wanted to talk to you about. The first one was the idea of myopia management, but actually I think that's probably a secondary conversation.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things you and I have been talking a little bit about is the idea of what's going on with private equity. It's not gone. What are you seeing, maybe not so much with private equity, but what are you seeing doctors who are my age, kind of in their 40s, late 30s, 40s, that sort of makes you think about what the future of things are going to hold?
Yeah, good question. And I've been seeing this a lot. I teach at the college. I consult and talk to so many doctors. And one of the big things that I'm seeing these days is, of course, the staff turnover problems. But what I'm seeing is a lot of doctors want out, more so than ever. Or at least they are having those conversations now earlier than I think they should. And what happens is I'm running to my colleagues. They're in their 40s. And they're saying, Tan, it's been hard since COVID. And I'm thinking about selling my practice. And they should be practicing for a couple more decades. Yeah. And
so they got out of school, they cold started practice, they put all this sweat equity in, maybe 12 to 14 years later, they're deciding, I want out. And largely it's because you think staff is hard, the grind of owning the practice is becoming not what they had idealized when they started.
Exactly. And that, I feel like, is more unique now than before COVID. I think pre-COVID, those conversations were not happening with these type of doctors. They're like, I'm going to keep going for the next 20 years. And it's something that's changed in the last couple of years where they're starting to just feel like burned out, basically. And they're having, they've got a nice practice, $1.5, $2 million practice, let's say. They've built it up over the last 15 years. And now the carrot that's dangling in front of them from private equity is like, here, I can give you a lump sum amount of money. You can put it away in the low cost index fund afterwards if you want to, and just live off the fat of the land, right? And it's very enticing. And these doctors are asking me and asking for my opinion, like, should I do it? And my opinion and my strong opinion is they should not.
Yeah.
And they should try to find things in optometry that they love. And to me, that's the bigger issue. I think they're running, but once they run, where do they run to? I think optometry is a great profession. And I think if they were to lose their practices, they'd lose a great asset that they own. There's a reason why private equities are trying to pay you off to buy your practice, because they know that they can do better owning your practice and be more profitable than even putting the money in the stock market. We were talking about that before we even started this thing. And so to me, the reason why it's a big topic is there's opportunity here too at the same time for those that are listening to this podcast. Yeah. And the listeners of this podcast are some of the smartest docs in the country.
I agree.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're smart because you're interested in learning more and getting better. So here's the opportunity for a lot of you guys is that know that in the next 5-10 years, a lot of doctors are going to want out. I think more so than before, even earlier than before, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years earlier than we thought they should. And the conversations I have with private equity, I've talked to them. They want to buy my practice, but I'm nowhere close. So they're wasting their time on me. But they see my practice. We've got like a staff of 20. They'd love to take me over. But what I see is that there's offices that are have the bigger offices. If you can keep your office and just do the things that you enjoy, doing a specialty like myopia management, dry eye, ocular diseases, scleral lenses, if you can find that type of love again, it's way better if you own it yourself. And so that's what I'm seeing these days. Also, a big opportunity, though, if you're listening to this podcast as well, is that these offices that are looking to sell earlier, you could be the guy to buy it.
Right. It doesn't have to go to private equity.
Exactly. Yeah. You could be, as long as you're structured and organized and have a team underneath you and you've built a management structure underneath you. For instance, one of my patients, he's a dentist. He owns like 84 practices.
Holy cow.
84 dental offices.
Oh my
and he
gosh.
walks into my exam and he says, like, Tan, or Dr. Mai, like, you're so smart. I can see you're good. And I've seen many other doctors. I am myself a dentist. And he's like, you're crazy. Just be here and just see patients, like, and spinning your wheels. Like, if I were you, of course he thinks this way because he's got 84 practices.
Yeah, that's what he does.
He's like, you need to, he says, if I mentored you, I would retire you in 3 years. You need to start buying these practices out. He says, now more so than ever, in his experience, he had 40 offices 2 years ago.
Jeez.
And now he's got 80. And he says COVID helped him.
Yep.
The reason why is because, if I would do like a SWOT analysis of optometry, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the weakness is a lot of optometrists are just kind of getting burdened by the administrative side of things. The reimbursement rates are stagnant. But the opportunity is that a lot of doctors want out.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity for a doc that's energetic is to be like this dentist that went from 40 to 80 locations. You can think like a shark. You can think like private equity and start buying these practices and start creating the team and infrastructure around them that you don't have to be there running it. And so I think that's a big opportunity as well.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I also so the idea of saying, look, there are these practices. Now, there's two challenges there. The first challenge is that the practices that are selling are looking at what you can offer as an individual compared to what private equity can offer as a big conglomerate.
Yep.
And they're saying, well, if you can't pay me this, then I'm not gonna sell you my practice for less.
Yep.
And I think that's one challenge. The other challenge is if you do that, do you become private equity yourself, right? Not technically private equity, but functionally, the one thing that I think that there are opportunities for different modes of practice for sure, and I don't think there's one mode that is bad per se by the nature of it. But I think ultimately, if you want to have the best opportunity to serve your patient's needs and have control of all of it, that's private practice. And that's why I think private practice is so important. It doesn't mean that you can't do that outside of it. Yep. It just means that private practice allows for the best control over that doctor-patient relationship and the experience that patient has. And so if you want to maximize that, the easiest way, the most effective way, in my opinion, is through private practice. But then if you own too many practices, then when does that private practice just become a big corporate practice? What's your thoughts on that?
You're no different, right? And so I kind of go back to the conversation that I have with my dentist, a patient who owns 84 practices. His model is this. He'll own 50% of that practice, but then an independent, like a doctor owner owns at least 50%. Or some of his circumstances are that he owns only 25% and the doctor owns 75%. So in that scenario, it's still very much independent.
Right.
He helps out with their marketing.
But each practice has its own feel.
Exactly. Each practice is not under his name.
Right.
It has actually a unique name that the doctor that's working there comes up with. The doctor that owns it with him hires the staff, creates the all the branding and all that. So it's very independent.
Yeah.
He happens to just be there to help facilitate it and help grow it, but at the same time, he doesn't own 100% of all of them, and they're under his corporate name, and they run all his systems. He's just there to help them, and ideally give them the systems that are very unique. It's very similar to Vision Source. Vision Source doesn't own all these practices. Vision Source is very good. I'm in Vision Source, so I've got a commercial bias for Vision Source. But
so do I.
Exactly.
Yep.
We're the same. Yep. And I love Vision Source because they don't say, you can brand yourself as Vision Source.
Yep.
You could be Vision Source and look very corporate in a way, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, Vision Source is very good about saying, you know what, I want to keep independent optometry. You can do whatever you want. We give you tools and resources, but at the same time, you're the doctor owner, and it's still very much a private practice.
Well, that's, I think, that is the good advantage with Vision Source. I think it's a misnomer, but the reality is that in your practice and in my practice, there's all these things that we have access to within Vision Source, and we could decide, well, I want all of it, or I want this piece and this piece and this piece, or I want none of it, and I just want all the idea sharing, and I'm going to figure out still how to do it on my own, but I'm going to pick everybody else's brain and use their insight and then kind of customize these things on my own. Like, that wouldn't be to my benefit probably as much, but I could do that. And so I think I like that idea of keeping ownership local, or at least a component of that ownership local. Does it wind up being that the doctors that sold are still the owner doctors, the partners, or most of them sold and then he brought in a new doctor and gave them some opportunity for ownership? Yeah,
most of the time. So he's very pro private practice for dentistry.
Yep.
As you know, they're going very corporate, and PE is actually
it's
very big.
It's bigger than it is in optometry. Right now.
Actually, a good thing to learn is the best ideas are always outside our industry.
Right.
And so they've got their DSO models and all this stuff, and I think dentistry is a little bit, and orthodontistry is a little bit before optometry for a lot of these type of things in terms of how they educate patients and how they structure their businesses. They're a little bit before us, actually. And so you can kind of watch these models happening in other industries first and know that it's going to come here then. Just like we've got problems with online glasses, they've got online braces now.
Right.
You can get Smile Direct Club, and that's like a multi-billion-dollar company, I think.
Yeah.
And so anyways, when it comes to these ideas from other industries, in dentistry, it's already happening with these corporations, that he is pro private practice, and by making so that, and I do believe that the best models, the best patient care happens in a private practice. I believe that.
Yep.
In fact, I feel like when a private equity company knocks off an optometry practice, I would think that cold start nearby.
Well, I think there's some people that I know that have done that, and they're like, this is going to be a windfall, because the patients in this community are used to having great care.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, those doctors either can't continue to provide that great care, or decide they're going to leave because their contract gets up. And so those patients want something else to go to, that's something that feels similar to why they started going there in the first place.
Exactly.
And now it feels like this entity that they didn't start with, so they want that. And I agree. I think that there's all those opportunities as well, like right across the street.
Exactly. And you're asking a quick question. What happens to the selling doctor, to this guy that owns 84 practices? Most of the time, the selling doctor wants out.
Yep.
That's why they're selling. And so they'll stick on for like a year. And then he usually has a young dentist, fresh out of school.
Yeah.
And he says, I asked him, is it hard to find these people? He goes, no. There's so many dentists right now that work in corporate chains that they want out. They want their own private practice. They want to make the decisions. They want to hire their own team.
But they can't afford it, or they don't think they know how to do it.
They're scared. The number one thing is fear.
Yep.
They don't have the tools. They're just scared of making the leap.
Yep.
And so his big proposition to them is, I will remove the fear from you. I've done this 84 times. All of them are multi-million dollars now. If you just join me, basically, I'll take you under my wing, and you'll be the owner. You'll be the majority of owner a lot of the times. A lot of them own 75%. And for them, that's like, yes, that's what I'm looking out. I'm trying to get out of corporate. I want into private practice. And so
does he ever want to sell the whole thing to those doctors? Like, is that ever an opportunity? So where he would own 50% for, say, 10 years, and now that new doctor's like, look, I want to have the rest of this, and I want to buy you out, and he gets to reap the benefits of that. That's part of the model, or not really?
Good question. I'm not sure, but my conversation with other, I talked to another optometrist in the UK who owns 150 locations or so, like over 100 in the UK. And I don't think that is in place. I think I'm just going to own it forever.
Right.
I'm sure, though, in the contract, there's some sort of buyout between the two. I know I had a conversation with someone that works underneath that guy, and they were saying how they actually don't want, so in this, my dentist, he'll sometimes own 25% only, but they say that's actually very dangerous in their opinion. I was asking them about that because they say this. If it's not 50-50, let's say the optometrist that you partner with shows up to work drunk, like dead drunk, lie on the ground, like just something's really going wrong. And they own 75%. You can never get rid of that person. So they say in their model, you always want to have a way for both people to get rid of each other. And so the 50-50 is what they recommended, and that's what they do with their 100-plus locations. And they're very pro-private practice, too. And so they say because you want the ability for each side to be able to equally negotiate when they want the other person gone. So I would think that, yes, there's probably maybe not a stipulation it's going to happen in 10 years, but there's always a stipulation of if we want out, we got to be able to do it.
So I want to round this out because the other thought I had is maybe you don't want to own a whole bunch of practices. You're happy you've built a $2 million practice or a $1.5 million practice or a $1 million practice, and you're saying, look, I'm netting 30%. And I'm super happy with this. I don't need to own that. I don't want the headache of doing all this other stuff, but I'm tired of the grind. I'm tired of seeing the same patients over and over and over again. So that's where we talk about adding a pillar to your practice, whether it's ocular surface disease or other ocular disease or anterior segment sort of specialty contacts or orthokeratology, myopia management. Why do you think, when you think the burden of saying, I'm going to sell this thing that I've worked so hard for the last 15 years to grow, or I can just work on this I can tinker here and do a little bit better and get kind of excited about this other thing. Why do you think that seems to be a harder challenge than to abandon this asset that you've gotten and offload it to somebody else than to say, let me tinker in my practice and spend a little bit more time doing something that I think could excite me? When you work with practices specifically on myopia management, why do you think it's hard for doctors to make that change, make that adjustment to add something else, as opposed to saying, I really just want out?
I think doctors, they're kind of like too lazy to be lazy in a way. So let me tell you what that means. Like, I don't mean this in a mean way, but basically, if you wanted to be really lazy, you would get into your specialty and put in the work, because ultimately that would get you there. Like, there's this great principle that I love called Pareto's principle. You probably heard
Pareto's
of it.
principle.
Pareto's principle.
Pareto's. I haven't heard of it.
Oh, let's talk about it right now. So this guy, let's say you are planting peas, right? He knows that if you're planting peas and you're trying to do a big pea farm, that 20% of the crops will actually produce 80% of the output. And the other 80% of the peas, he could just burn them. And they only give him like 20%. And what happens, though, is that unless you weed out that 80%, then you're constantly grinding away and trying to grow peas and busting your butt. In optometry, that's what's happening in optometry. Most doctors, if you look at your patient base in any private practice, it probably follows these genetic rules that nature has given us. And what that means is that probably 20% of your patients give you 80% of your revenue. I bet you if you looked at your breakdown of all your patients, like count the last 1,000 patients, probably 20 or maybe 30% of them give you 70 to 80% of your revenue. So what ends up happening is you're literally spinning your wheels on the other 70 to 80% of your patients and going nowhere. And so myopia management, that's what that ties in. Those are definitely part of the 20%. Like in our office, we decided, and the reason why I love practicing optometry is that I'm getting away from the grind, is that we dropped actually all medical insurances. We only take 2 vision plans right now, which we can eventually drop. We could actually drop all primary care if we wanted to, like, and shut down the optical, and I'd be fine. I'd be fine. I'd be completely happy, you know. And the reason why is because we focus on the specialties like myopia management, orthokeratology. I do a lot of scleral lenses as well personally, and then also my partner does vision therapy. If you go to a conference, if you go to these conferences like COVD, if you go to the Vision by Design conference for orthokeratology and myopia, those doctors are the most happy doctors. They're on fire. Those guys are like, if you go to a COVD conference, everyone's like literally like, yes, like optometry. And it's so unique. You don't get that at a Vision Expo. You don't get that at a lot of conferences. And the reason why is because their entire practice is the 20%. And that's everything else they've dropped, and it's not a grind. Those patients are showing up, they're happy, they're paying you privately. You don't have to have an army of staff. Like if I got rid of 80% of your patients, and you only lost 20% revenue, guess what? Not that you'd want to, but now you don't need 80% as much staffing, for instance. And that's the number one problem in optometry right now that I've talked to is staffing. All of a sudden, doing a specialty helps alleviate that staffing problem because you can actually trim back on some of those wheels you're spinning. And so, you know, if you don't have to see 35 patients a day to make it, you can see 5. Like, you know, let's say a myopia management patient or a scleral lens patient or vision therapy patient gives you $3,000 on average. So my practice, our average revenue per patient is over $1,000. Average. And because all we care about is a specialty. So we decided at the very beginning, I'm only caring about the 20%. Basically the specialties. For another office, that 20% is our entire office. And we opened cold 6 years ago, and we didn't care at all about selling a pair of glasses. We sold them because, you know, patient comes in, they want to get some. But all of our marketing, all of our networking, creating the relationships in the community, talking to therapists, other optometrists, ophthalmologists, get referrals. We said, I'm not going to spin my wheels trying to see a lot of patients today. I'm going to go out in the community, I'm going to meet someone. And that's so uncomfortable for most people. Exactly. But was it uncomfortable for you? It was at first. But it gets easier with time. Everything does. Exactly. But that hour you spend with a ophthalmologist. So I'll give you an example. My entire schedule, my myopia has grown so much that my associates do a lot of it, and my other partner. Most of my schedule, 80% of it is just scleral lenses. It's just scleral. I have to follow up, dispense, consult all day long now. How did I do that in 6 years? All I did was just take corneal specialists out to lunch. That was it. Literally, that was it. And that 1 hour lunch is worth more than seeing like 6 months worth of patients. That 1 hour of lunch, because that corneal specialist starts just dumping all their patients onto my schedule. And so the optometrist that does that, and to me, I'm surprised because I'm in Southern California. I'm in a densely populated metropolitan area with so many optometrists. I figured someone else had to have done this before and met these corneal specialists, but the answer was no. They were like, "Oh, I'm glad to meet someone that fits scleros." I'm like, "You've been here for like 30 years. How come me, who I've just graduated, you know, from practicing for a few years, open this practice cold is like one of the first lunches you've had?" It's because most optometrists are scared to have lunch with someone else. They're just scared. But if you do that type of work, it's you being, that little bit is just a huge lever. And creating relationships is how you create a tidal wave of new patients in those specialties. For myopia management, 65% of our patients are referred by another optometrist. And so a lot of optometrists, they're working in corporate, they don't have time for myopia management. It takes a lot of time. I create those relationships with them, they start referring us a bunch of patients. They don't think they have a lot of time. Exactly. But they could create it. They could create it. Yes. Exactly. Right, because it's so sad. If they like, one of the things that we have in Vision Source is the myopia management protocol.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you will be really big about is talking about the fee structure.
Yeah.
And calculating that as compared to how much you'd make doing primary care, and pricing it accordingly so that you're not spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
Right.
You're agnostic. You can take the time it takes to do that, and you're still and it's worth it. It's worth your time. You're eliminating the idea of, because the gnaw, and I think it's subconscious, but the gnaw in the back of the brain when you haven't thought about the value of the services you're providing and pricing those services appropriately, then in the back of your brain, when things don't go wrong, when your process has a speed bump, you're thinking, ugh, I could have just seen this patient and sold him a pair of glasses.
Yes.
And you got to eliminate that from your thinking.
Absolutely.
And the way you eliminate it is to on the front end, calculate all of the time that you're going to spend, calculate all of and make it worth that time. And then when it doesn't go the way you wanted it to, and you have to learn more, you have to think about, how am I going to improve this specific situation and learn how to do this better. You don't care because you've already calculated the time it's going to take to do that.
Exactly. The reason why I love practicing is if a patient wants to spend an hour with me, I'm like, cool, let's do it. And let's say they ask for it. I'll do it because my prices are so high.
Well, I mean,
not in a bad way, but I'm saying not.
They're high enough so that you can be comfortable spending an hour with them.
I can be like, if they say, hey, Dr. Mai, I had a bad day. I'm like, oh. You know, some doctors are just too fast. They're like, oh, okay, you had a bad day, whatever. I'm gonna keep going with my exam. I go, well, I stop everything. Why? And they'll say, oh, you know, my mother just passed away. Something sad. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And then we'll have a conversation about that. We'll develop rapport. We'll send flowers to their house. Yeah. You know, we'll you know, when kid graduates from kindergarten or high school, we'll send a box of chocolates. We'll like do things like that. We have a prize counter where we have like Chuck E. Cheese prizes and things like that. Like we make it
building relationships.
We're building relationships like that. And because the reason why is because we spent time with the patient. The reason why we can spend time with the patient is because we set our fees right. If you don't set your fees right, you can't do all those things because you gotta pay your rent, you gotta pay your staff. You can't spend an hour on every patient. But if you set your fees right, you can create such a great environment in your practice where the relationships are great, the staff is not overworked, because I could see 5 patients a day and pay all the bills. And I don't need an army of staff if that happens. And they're not rushed as well. And when you create that practice where you're looking, you're doing Pareto's principle in your practice, you're ignoring the 80%. You're going to dive into myopia, dry eye, scleral lenses, vision therapy. That's where you can love optometry. And that's where we kind of got sidetracked in a way with the private equity stuff because we wanted to talk about myopia first. But the reason why we talked about that is because the best thing of optometry is the future of optometry, and it's getting better every day, in my opinion. And the fact that we can do these things, like myopia wasn't a big deal 5 years ago. We weren't talking about it as much. But to me, it's a game changer. It's a tidal wave. Unfortunately, myopia is just going from COVID. And if you price it accordingly, if you spend the time with those patients, no one in healthcare is doing it. So when we talk about other industries, no one in healthcare spends time with patients anymore. Because of managed care and a lot of reasons. When you are that weird, there's a good book by Seth Godin called Purple Cow. And he's a great
Kimbo,
Kimbo guy. Yeah, exactly. He's got a great podcast I listen to as well. And he's like, in all of healthcare, let's say you're that purple cow setting your patients flowers when their mothers pass away, donating to cancer societies on behalf of patients when things go wrong like that. When you're that weird purple cow doctor that does that and sponsoring the local baseball team and things like that, they're like, this place is so different. The word of mouth goes poof. So at our practice, our online reviews looks like we're cheating. We have like hundreds and hundreds of online reviews from Google, Yelp. All of them are 5 stars. Like literally all of them except for like one crazy guy. But
we all have one.
Exactly. But it looks like we're cheating. But how did we cheat? All I did was I spent time with patients. I only cared about the 20%.
Dr. Thanh Mai. Thanks so much for doing this. This was an awesome conversation. Thanks for having it. I think that you've inspired a lot of us to kind of rethink about the way we practice and figure out how we can kind of focus on that 20%.
Focus on the 20%. And then, then slowly look at your schedule and, spend time with those patients. And you'll never want to leave optometry.